How are your feet doing, Matthias?
I think we can be successfully moving on
Okay.
from feet
Okay.
talk.
Oh, no more feet talk?
Well, until I start running
Are we
again.
gonna move up a little and talk about my ankle for a bit,
Oh
or
yeah,
is that also
Douglas.
it's yeah, it's healing surprisingly well. It's still slow, but I was able to hike 6 miles yesterday in the park, so
Well, there you go.
I kind of don't I'm not that worried anymore. It's
With
sore, but who cares,
with
right?
ankle brace on.
Yep, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Ankle brace on, and then anytime I move, I kind of did like the penguin walk, so I didn't put too much pressure to like turn my ankle while leaving my foot still. So that was fun.
And
But
nobody
otherwise,
nobody was there to video that.
no one was there. Like I had the
Like
entire trail
period.
to myself. It was great.
Amazing. So this is the extent of our trail running conversation for
Ankle Watch 2021.
Ankle Watch 2021 for this episode of Single Track because we have a guest with us, and we're super excited that we were able to finagle this, and it would take an after show to kind of explain how we got there. But we have Roberto Gutierrez with us, who works for Jack Wolfskin. And I bet most of our listeners have never heard of Jack Wolfskin, which is super exciting because Jack Wolfskin is a German outdoor brand that's been around for a few decades, pretty much my entire life. And I've grown up with it and I've loved it. And now Jack Wolfskin is rolling out here in the US, and Roberto is in charge of the rollout. And so we're going to have a conversation around Jack Wolfskin. And therefore, Roberto, thanks for coming on the show. Welcome. Say hello to our listeners.
Hello, thank you for having me. Yeah, it was very fortuitous that we connected up. I'm super excited to be here.
Fantastic. So before we dive into Jack Wolfskin, share a little bit about you. Obviously, you work for Jack Wolfskin, and you are based out of Park City now, where we met up as Scott and I were driving down to Zion. But you've been in the outdoor industry for quite some time prior to that. So why don't you share a little bit about your experience in the outdoor world?
Sure. So at a high level, I was wrapping up a PhD in language and communicative disorders and was a little disenchanted with academia and kind of jumped on the old startup train in San Francisco, slept on couches, hustled around for a while, and became, after a bit of hustle, the co-founder of an outdoor company called Oru Kayak. You may have seen us on Shark Tank or Kickstarter or any number of other things. A bit of a crowd-funded thing and a really cool origami kayak. It folds up and fits in the back of your trunk, weighs 20 to 25 pounds depending on the model. And that propelled me into the outdoor space. I had always been out in the outdoors as a guide and an enthusiast, but this put me in an entrepreneurial position. I was the CMO, so Chief Marketing Officer there, and ultimately left to do a few other things, bounced around, was with United Sports Brands and Nathan Sports in particular recently, and recently began working here at Jack Wolfskin to lead the marketing efforts in North America. So that's a bit about me.
That's fantastic. That was like the perfect elevator pitch.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody could do that
No,
any more efficient.
That's the most concise and clear introduction we've ever had. I appreciate that. Where did you guide, and what's kind of like your outdoor background? Like what inspired you to explore outdoors and want to get into that outdoor industry?
Well, so I was living in Ecuador, working at a zoo as part of an internship program that I had helped build. Well, you design your own as part of this program. So it was a year-long academic endeavor. The last 3 months are a program you yourself design, and I selected to live in the Amazon and help build a zoo and museum on a little, it's quote, island, but really a peninsula between two rivers at the Delta. And the family I lived with ran a whitewater rafting company in Tena, Ecuador. And they were looking one day for a translator, and I was like, sure, I can do that. I can speak Spanish and English, and they had a lot of German clientele who spoke English as well, so I spoke to the vast majority of the folks they had there. Started paddling, fell in love with it, came back to Seattle, it was the University of Washington at the time, and started paddling quite a bit there. And that's when I started dabbling more and more in for like truly guiding, not just, adventuring with other people. And then became a relatively proficient paddler in San Diego, did some surf competitions and a variety of other things, and gained a couple of sponsorships at the time. So primarily my guiding and instruction was in the kayaking space, but I helped run the outdoor program at San Diego State, and then a little bit with UCSD as well during my graduate school. Guiding primarily trips, like Baja California in the sea caves on the Pacific side and in the Sea of Cortez on the Cortez side. But any number of things from hiking, caving, climbing, kayaking, so on and so on. So.
That's amazing. That's an amazing resume. I love it. It's fun. I think the outdoor space is sort of unique. I don't know if unique, but there's something fun when you go beyond your job description and what you hear, the hat that you're wearing at Jack Wolfskin, because that's an interesting story in itself. And Doug and I talked off mic that we really enjoy the business side of this, but then when you actually step back and you hear people's stories and their experiences and their passions for the outdoors, then it almost gets more interesting. Sorry, Jack Wolfskin, I think we're going to be talking about caving and guiding for the rest of the episode.
I think if we throw in PhD burnout into that, we have like an entire series of podcasts.
I know, that's amazing.
My first gig outside of academia was at a startup called Insight Data Science, and we were helping academics who had burned out get jobs as data scientists. And so, like, literally the project manager on the Higgs boson project, they wrapped it up, found the smallest particle ever detected, and then he was out of a job. And we're like, oh, wow. And so he would join our program. So yeah, academic burnout, I've got many stories.
Oh yeah. I'm surrounded by advanced mathematics people out here in the Bozeman area, and nice. And every single one of them is basically like looking at their graduation day, being like, "And that's the day I'm done with academia." And it's like, all right, great. So, but we're not going to talk about that today, even though I really want to now. So Jack Wolfskin, the first time I ever heard of it in the States was from Matthias. We went on one of our first hikes, and he had a backpack that I don't know how long you've had, Matthias, but I had never heard of the brand before. And so during the hike, he told me kind of about the company, and I'm going to kind of toss it over to you, Matthias, to kick off the actual like business talk here.
Right on. Thank you. Yeah. Well, the backpack I actually still have. I think my son used it for 1 year in high school or middle school as a school backpack. Shameless advertising how durable those backpacks are. I think I bought it when I was 15 or 16 or so, when I took my first trip
like the 70s, right?
70s. When I took my first trip down to South Africa and I needed a carry-on backpack. Jack Wolfskin, and it's interesting to hear they are celebrating their 40th anniversary this year, that they've not been around for that long prior to me being introduced to the brand. So they must have made a huge impact in Germany at the time, because I sort of was fully aware of the brand, but they were only a few years old back then. And it was the absolute cool brand from what I remember. I know that there were obviously the Las Sportivas and North Face, but definitely Patagonia. I mean, there were the big established brands around, and especially shoe brands in the Alps were big because everybody goes hiking, so a lot of very established shoe brands. But Jack Wolfskin came on the market and we all bought it. We thought that wolf paw as a logo was really cool, and they had poppy colors and stuff. And that's how I got introduced to the brand. And I still use the gear up until then. With that said, I was very confused when I came over here and realized that a lot of European brands had successfully established themselves, and Jack Wolfskin did not exist, because in Europe it is a huge brand. You could probably talk to in terms of numbers, but from a lay person, if you just walk down the street, it's as big as Columbia and North Face from just people wearing their gear, right? So yes, do you know why Jack Wolfskin never came over here prior to now?
Honestly, I think it was because of the success they were seeing in Europe. There was and I don't know fully. I've only been in this role about 6 months, and I'm a part of the greater globalization, right? So we have offices all over the world, and so that's a big part of what I'm here to do. I guess what this team here in Salt Lake City or Park City are here to do. But I think the reason is the wild success they had in Central Europe, right? So they were the number one, continue to be the number one outdoor brand in Central Europe, with I believe 850 stores and 350 some brand stores throughout Europe.
Yeah.
And so just their presence alone and wild success was enough lift, frankly. And so I think they sort of decided, hey, if we're winning here, let's keep winning. And then for those who don't know, Jack Wolfskin was acquired by Callaway Golf in 2019. And so Callaway is now the parent company and has been pushing to globalize Jack Wolfskin. And that's, again, why our team here is in Park City.
Yeah, makes sense. So Jack Wolfskin, it's an outdoor brand, primarily clothing, shoes, tents, backpacks. So essentially they run the gamut. What are the are you bringing the full line over? Are you bringing certain key pieces over? What's sort of the strategy?
Yeah, we're bringing key collections over. So we have our pack and go line is all designed to pack down into small pockets and also be layerable. So there's a small packable back, a shirt, a shell, a puffy coat, a vest, so on and so forth, pants, shorts, and the like, all of which are meant to be portable and travel. That collection has performed really well because it's a little bit different, it's nuanced, but it brings a travel component to the outdoor sports, right? Then beyond that, it's sort of the technology stories. So one of the neat things about Jack Wolfskin is they've always been uncompromising with sustainability and transparency. And so, rather than work with an existing company, they said, hey, that's not good enough. We want more transparency. So we're going to develop a recycled membrane that's 100% recycled and waterproof and stretchy and breathable all in-house. And so we bring all of those technologies with us, so the tech support ecospheres and our responsibly sourced downs and whatnot. So the collection has been highly curated. There are 3 or 4 primary stories, but beyond that, it's a technology and performance component.
And their clothing has always been not incredibly focused on extreme sports. So you wouldn't find Jack Wolfskin on top of Mount Everest, but you will definitely find Jack Wolfskin on a hike to wherever, through the enchantments or whatever. So it's clothing that is approachable, and especially when you look at price points, very, very aggressively approachable here. Especially here in the US, I don't know what the exchange rates are currently at, but it's product, especially when you look from a sustainability point of view, and I'm doing the marketing for you here, that is almost too good, priced too good to be true. It's fantastic that you can get that level of sustainability at these prices.
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple of things on that. So the brand at the core has always been hike.
Right.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned Mount Everest. We actually are supporting an athlete who's currently on Mount Everest.
Oh, cool. Okay.
As we speak.
Nice.
So it does, like you said, run the gamut of product and whatnot. So we are not his full kit, right? But we are components of it. But that's it. The core of the company has been in hike and trail. So from, a touring perspective or backpacking or, and then ski as well. So with all of that, it's, been designed in that way, and the technologies have been developed, to meet those standards. And as a result, we're able to carve out our own space. And again, I think what's interesting is that the technologies are all owned by Jack Wolfskin, which gives us full control over them. And in doing so, we have more pricing control, right? We're not buying from a third party.
You don't have to buy exactly.
Right.
So does that mean you don't find the Gore-Tex label on your clothing because you have your own waterproofing?
Correct. You'll see Texapor, which is which was one of the original technologies back in the day. So.
Yeah, those are the jackets I used to wear. that was the big label. Fantastic.
And so you guys are coming in right as the outdoor industry is still just absolutely exploding in the States. You're obviously trying to get known in an already somewhat crowded market. Are you primarily relying on your own marketing, or are you going to be in major retailers as well?
So yes and yes.
Okay.
Honestly, so one of the interesting things is, so I'm helping. We are all helping to build the brand here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the major things I've been charged with. The thing is the brand exists. It's a matter of gaining the awareness, right?
Yes.
And so it's not. It's kind of but showing up and saying, hey, it's our 40th anniversary is like showing up to 16 like somebody's graduation and be like, hey, I'm 40. They're like, I don't care. And so we're telling stories around our technologies, our sustainability, our transparency. And then, as Matthias mentioned earlier, wolves. So Jack Wolfskin was inspired by wolves in the wild on a Canadian hiking trip in 1980. And as a result, it has the name Wolfskin. In the name, you have Wolfskin. So we're talking about wolves, and I know it's a really polarizing topic at times, but we're sort of trying to present it in an educational manner and bring people to the table, right? And by associating ourselves with a story and something that we care about dearly that has the name Wolf in it, we're hoping that the recognition, the memorability of it all sort of aligns. So we're doing as much as we can with a relatively small team. There are only 10 of us here in the U.S. at the moment. And so the brand and brand awareness components are coming from stories that we tell, lead generation and exposure, and basically partnering with key partners. So
nice.
It is fascinating to follow along, seeing European brands sort of having to reinvent. And I mean, I think every global brand has that challenge. How do you position a brand that has established itself in a market and has created products around the way the market responds to whatever activity they're doing, and then they're entering a new market and they sort of have to retool. And I've been following this for a while with various European brands as they come over, because, the European outdoor space is just so different. The story that I'm endlessly repeating is that if you go hiking in the Alps, you don't need these self-relying backcountry wilderness accessories, because you've got a hut every 5 miles where you can stay overnight, and so you have different kind of expectations on your gear, and as you come over here, you can easily sort of fill this in, but from a marketing, you need to tell a story. So it's interesting. It's it's obvious that you landed on wolves, but it's also very interesting because that's obviously a message that nostalgically would work for Europeans, but obviously is really tailored for the US market. So tell us a little bit. A great coincidence in all of setting this all up is that you just came back from a trip up to Yellowstone. Tell us a little bit about your trip there, who you met there, and how it was.
Yeah, so we are working with the Yellowstone Wolf Trackers. Nathan and Linda are the founders. Nathan actually grew up in the park on the Minnesota side near Gardner, Minnesota, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And Linda did her graduate work in San Diego, and then was one of the first people on the ground after the 1995 reintroduction of wolves. So the two have basically been there as long as the wolves have, in Nathan's case, longer, since reintroduction. And they are advocates of education and awareness. They understand both sides of the story and the implications of it, but they focus on educating the general populace by leading guided tours to observe and track wolves. And what's interesting is we were out there like 2 weeks ago, I guess, and we met before sunrise, and you were mentioning the gear and its design and all that. Our stuff is so perfectly suited for the sort of the adventurer seeking sort of that the nuance of discovering something, right? Changing a perspective, like laying low in the woods and waiting for something to happen. You need down pants and a really comfy jacket that's also super warm. We've got you covered. You know what I mean? And so the alignment on the product that we have, as well as the story of our brand and what we stand for, educating and exploration and discovery, we align super well with this group of guides who are educating folks around national parks. And so we're basically telling their story and their relationship with the wolves and bears and all the other wildlife, frankly, in an effort to basically just showcase not the truth, but a perspective on the ground. So when truth is the first casualty of war, right? And right now our politics here are at war. And so with that, everybody's abandoning all truths and talking about hearsay and this, that, the other. We just wanted to present some factual information and talk about things in a matter-of-fact way and get the ball rolling to have both sides at the table. Because if you just hear one side, you've heard bias, not fact. And so what we're trying to do again is just to share information and education. And Linda and Nathan are phenomenal people, just so knowledgeable that it's wild. And so they're the perfect people. We've only been once, and we're going back over the course of the next 4 months to document, the wolves and what they're up to. So
nice. Yeah, that is. I'm up here in Livingston, Montana, and I dip into the park like once a week. So I heard you guys were there, but I was down in the interior because they had just opened it. But I think you found yourself in a place that really needs an accurate dialogue of conservation, of population control, of everything that happens with the animals in and around the park. You have, Montana passing legislation, Idaho passing legislation, Wyoming passing legislation. All that is, I think Idaho just passed something that they're trying to wipe out 90% of their wolf population. And it's definitely a trigger point in conversations locally. And to have somebody come in working with the locals is going to be very good. When you were out here, I kind of already know the answer to this, but how did you perceive the interactions of people versus wildlife while in the park? It's fascinating, right? Like you're kind of what was interesting about it was I would almost argue the bubble of in the park and bubble out of the park more than otherwise, where when you're in the park, you're in awe. Like Yellowstone is breathtaking, right? And I mean, you're watching bison cross the road, and you see a bear and wolves, working on an elk they had killed the night before, and it's just like, wow, this is raw, this is amazing, it's just unreal. And then you hop back out and you get service, and you see a post of that just happens to come across your feed, likely because I've been searching wolves a lot, but about how wolves devastate X, Y, and Z, or how all wolves should be protected at all costs. And it's like, okay, I mean, it's honestly, and the entire time you're in the park, though, there's this balance. There's talk of balance and coordination and collaboration. And as soon as you leave, it's just, I don't know. Basically, it's so polarized. It was fascinating to sort of experience that. So, yeah, I was curious if how much that came through, especially since you were with people who are very attuned to all of that as well. When you are, obviously the wolf connection was huge. Were you guys aware that, okay, this is going to be some legwork to kind of be that, to bridge that gap for communication? when you first started getting into it, or was this something that you kind of realized and then have to adapt to?
No, yeah. I mean, so my family has a cattle ranch in central New Mexico. My dad has worked in agriculture for like 5 decades now. So I mean, our family is super aware of that. And so we were actually we connected with ranchers and farmers and fish and game. We spoke with veterinarians, and we got all manner of perspective on it, right? And we heard, we heard very polarizing, and everybody, we just listened. So everybody definitely, some people got very excited, but they definitely did their best to present their arguments in a unbiased manner, like to the best of their ability, right?
Yeah.
And so it was really, really fascinating to learn why and try and understand why wolves are so polarizing, right? Like in some basic research, I think there are 18,000 wolves in all of North America, and 11,000 of them are in Alaska. And so, like, the vast majority aren't even in the lower 48. There are something like 4 million coyotes in the U.S., right? And coyotes kill, I believe, I'll have to look up the stats, I apologize, but I believe it's 15 times more cattle than wolves do. Domestic dogs kill something like 6 times more cattle than wolves do. But the thing is, what wolves do is they will ravish, just absolutely destroy one person's herd. And so the local impact is devastating. And the impact of that is very memorable. And so the story, the documentation, that whole piece, you'll hear from, and it's a tight-knit community among ranchers, right? So you'll hear, oh my God, these wolves absolutely devastated our stock this year. And they're not wrong. They did. From a statistical perspective, you're looking at the numbers going like, well, but that's 1/15 of what coyotes did. But a coyote, 4 million coyotes pick off one cow here and there. It doesn't, or calf one here and there. That doesn't make the same impact to that rancher. And so it was really interesting to gain those perspectives and talk about, restitution and how that all worked, and why it was so frustrating. So, we knew that coming into it, and doing the research made it even more apparent, how far from meeting in the middle people were.
Yeah. I think that's a great understatement about the climate. It is just so extreme, because you just don't hear about any balanced story, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the work that you guys are putting out and having that conversation. I think deciding to go with a conservation and an educational mentality when you are also building the brand is a fun way to not just talk about yourself, but to talk about the positive things that we all can do. When you were in the park, how did the gear respond? How did the group enjoy it? Did anybody turn their heads and they're like, oh, what's that? Any of those stories of gear in the park?
Yeah, a little bit. So, I mean, the fun part with it is there's a wolf paw in our logo, right? So, and the word wolf is there. So it certainly has a, oh, wow, what is that? That's really neat. And there's this one-to-one connection of, in the park itself, with the product and name. But as far as performance is concerned, I mean, we didn't push anything to the limits. We had a snowstorm, and I think it was 9 degrees when we got going. So it was cold, but not like, we weren't in frostbite conditions or anything crazy like that. So we were comfortable throughout, and it all, did its job swimmingly. But I would say we didn't necessarily push anything to its absolute limits. So.
Yeah, as long as you weren't there in February when it was like negative 45.
My goodness, yeah.
Absolutely brutal.
Doug mentioned that it's fun to align any business, marketing and new business to a topic like that. But it's more than fun. It's very courageous, because I think so many outdoor brands choose a much safer route for marketing. I mean, you could have chosen van life, right? I mean, you could have chosen marketing images that are safe, that don't have any, well, I mean, if you ask me, van life is controversial too, because I don't know how much we need to promote endless individual driving and fossil fuel burning. But in general, it is wildly accepted that those are the images that we want to associate with when we make outdoor purchases, right? It's more about sort of individual discovery and the wide open road, perhaps even athleticism, but mainly like self-exploration, if you will. So to take that route into something that is potentially so polarizing is bold. Can you speak to the conversation that you had internally that made you land at something so potentially contentious?
Yeah, I mean, we're still early in this process, so we are also learning, right? I mean, at a high, there's a few things, but like with discovery being a key component of what our brand stands for, I'd be, if you think about the National Geographic Explorer type folk of the world, like that is our perfect persona and clientele. They're doing really amazing and somewhat extreme things, but with a spin, and their activity isn't necessarily about reaching the pinnacle of a physical activity, but reaching the pinnacle of knowledge in a way, and documentation. And so with all of that said, what we could have chosen any number of storytellers or documentaries. We chose the wolf side of things because of the name and alignment.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece of it. The internal conversations, we went back and forth. There's certainly been, for everyone who loves something, there's somebody who hates it. So, there are those who really dislike the logo and really don't love the name and don't understand it. And so what we decided to do is, well, from a brand side of things, you can either run away from that or you can lean into it. And the company's like, no, this is who we are. Like the company's very proud of who it is, what it's done, and what it stands for. And in doing so, you're proud of your name. And so those are the reasons we decided to think and talk about these things. Taking a stance on education and sort of supporting critical thinking. I mean, there's a dozen books, stories, podcasts about the death of truth of late. And yeah, we're not trying to jump on a bandwagon in any sense of the word, but we're really just trying to stand for something that the company has believed in and continues to believe in. So it's a little bit of looking back at who you are and just being yourself, right? So I think that was the honest part of it. Is we looked back at the history of the brand and like, hey, you know what, this is what we do. Like, we haven't lost sight of it. We just don't talk about it enough. And so that's all it really was,
I like it. We've had this conversation when we met in Park City a couple of weeks ago around alignment and promoting a brand through athletes and influencers. And you as a marketing strategist and somebody who represents the brand on a much larger scale, you had an interesting perspective, and I wanted to bring that conversation to the podcast a little bit, because I think here on the ground we see, and I don't know, Doug, if you feel the same way, but at least among my trail runners, hey, look, we said the word trail running once more for
there
Trail
we go.
Running
We did it.
podcast. Yay! No, I think a lot of purchasing decisions are being made by people seeing athletes choosing certain brands, either as ambassadors or just personally. But I don't see the numbers, right? I don't see how much that actually moves the needle. This is just anecdotes, if you will. What's your conversation internally? Is that an important aspect that to play this game? I mean, I think athletes hate the term that they are influencers, but on a larger scale, I put them into the same bucket, even if they are winning races. And when it comes to the brand alignment to the business, that's what they do. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. I think that's just sort of the function that they do, that they fulfill. How do you as a brand feel about this partnership and this sort of opportunity, if you will, to promote your brand in this way?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think that the world has changed in what is engaging and who the outdoor industry is engaging with. For so long, the outdoor industry pursued top of mountain and wanted to be the best of the best and the elites. And, we'd find the LeBron Jameses of the outdoor space, right? Like, oh, this person stands for the best of the best. And being good at your sport was enough. Now the standards of media have changed so much that you also need content creators, and it's not every athlete who can also do content. And it's to your point, it's not a slight, it's sort of a truth.
Yeah.
And so it's almost these days where the content creator side of things leads the charge, because content is king, frankly. And so, I mean, for example, in the race you were running, Hayden Hawks is a good friend of mine. He crushed the record there. And in the outdoor, in the ultra running world, Hayden's he's a legend, right? Like, the guy crushes. He's so fast and has a chance at, breaking records every time he steps on a course. But if I asked my mom or dad who it was, they wouldn't know.
Right.
And they've run multiple marathons, they ride bikes all the time, and they just wouldn't know. And so being a legend in your sport doesn't necessarily translate to growing an audience. Whereas, if I were to mention somebody with 6 million followers on Instagram, my mom would probably know that person, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Probably not the person's name, but the person's Instagram handle, right? I don't know what the person's called, but I know it is.
Yeah. Explaining it to your folks is always fun. But I make that as a wild example. But it is, if you're reaching new people, which is what the outdoor sports space is doing, as we grow in number and in force, and with COVID impacting the industry so much in the last year, so many people venturing out for the first times, they're going further maybe. The world is expanding, the outdoor space is expanding rapidly. And then with diversity and inclusion, the world in the outdoor space is trying to be much more welcoming. And if you're talking about something only one person can do, that's actually can be alienating. And so I think that the athletes have had to adjust their messaging and presentation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. I just Solomon this morning launched a new campaign focusing on women, and just the visuals were so different to what we've previously seen. And obviously they got a lot of cheering for that. And it's been, I remember a few months ago watching a stand-up comedy where an African-American was talking about camping and was saying, you white people are all insane that you would want to do this willingly. And I mean, there are myriads of reasons for it, but one of them is clearly representation, right? I mean, if we don't give people access, and storytelling in many ways shares that very first way of introducing people to a place, right? So yeah, no, that's an interesting point of view for sure. Doug, what you got?
So I have there with this push to kind of get involved with the Wolves. It speaks to the kind of history of Jack Wolfskin, and as you guys are celebrating 40 years as a company, can you speak a little bit about how the company has been environmental leaders since very early on? I mean, on the website, it's talking about switch to green energy at all our German locations in the 2000s. That is definitely early on. What's kind of the history with environmentalism and sustainability as a company?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. The crazy part about that was internally, it was basically decided that was table stakes early on. And now, honestly, the brand has helped spearhead so many things, but quietly, because it was the right thing to do. So they just did it. They didn't, necessarily amplify it to the extent, possibly should have at that time. And we're working on telling those stories now. But you can look at any product we have. There's a little tag in it, and there's a few digits, a code on it. You can plug that into the website and search, and it'll take you to the factory and the sourcing for every product we make, giving you full visibility into where everything comes from, even address and contact information for the factories. Like, it's wild levels.
Oh, wow.
Of transparency. And it was just determined that that's how we operate. And so part of the educational component and all of that, it brings this loyalty, which we've gotten in stores at an exceptional level. Now, as we move more and more digitally and expanding into new arenas and countries, where in the U.S. it's admittedly really competitive, right? You've got many, many brands here, from a Patagonia to a Cotopaxi or other, who stand for things. And, how do we don't want to say, hey, we used to do that, or we've been doing it longer. We're just trying to explain our story throughout. And a big part of that has been, basically, it's table stakes. And so they're just saying, hey, look, this is what we do. This is who we are. And it came from the founders early on. And so they were sitting there going, hey, it's amazing hearing those wolves in the wilderness. I wish there was a material that was as sustainable or had as little impact as natural as possible, as like the natural world and those things, like a wolf's skin, but provided the same level of protection for people. And so that was sort of an early concept. I know that something was lost in translation in the German side there, but basically the idea was they wanted to make it as little and durable as possible. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So as such a responsible company, how are you guys addressing the influx of visitors to public lands, into the outdoors? Are you doing anything to encourage leave no trace with any sort of like tags or media or anything like that? Or is this something that's coming in the future?
So we have a wolf trail program currently, and there are a few stages of it. And this year, early on, we're brand new to the market, right? Mm-hmm. We're anniversarying our presence here this next month. So, but what we're doing is starting with some grassroots people, talking about the places they feel most at home or most welcome in the outdoors. It could be a stroll in a park, could be top of a mountain. And then as we work through that, we're culminating the end of the year with a large cleanup effort at the base of Mount Whitney, and then ultimately summiting Whitney and then going to Badwater to clean up as well, showcasing the highest and lowest points in the contiguous United States, but also talking about the impact along the way. And we'll be working with journalists and editors, writers and whatnot to tell that story and showcase the impact that the parks have had over the course of the last couple of years. And so it is in the works, and we will be doing that. It's just a matter of, those things don't happen overnight, and so you'll probably hear about it in December.
Yeah, exactly.
What, Roberto, you're a year in the country, and you're just starting up and running, and you haven't everything figured out yet. Come on, we have high expectations on you.
I was going to say, those wolves would have adapted to their surroundings. That's just not fair.
That is amazing. Roberto, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think, as I've said now multiple times, for me and Doug, this is super fascinating. I hope to our listeners as well. I think this is such an interesting aspect of our world that we work in, either professionally or we spend a lot of time in either dreaming about what we can do in the weekends or actually actively doing. It's great to have Jack Wolfskin in the country. You'll be, dear listeners, hearing a lot more about the brand in the coming years, especially from me. As
I have to say, I popped on the website a week ago, and I keep going onto it almost every day because there's like 12 or 13 things that I really am like, this is awesome. This is awesome. If you haven't done it, just go to the website and check it out. There's gear there that is very sleek and great looking. Not to do your job for you, Roberto, but like I'm looking at this, and even tents, like the tents are great too. So if you haven't checked it out, just check out the gear there.
Roberto, final words to our listeners from your end before we let you go.
No, I thank you all for listening. Check out us.jackwolfskin.com. And yeah, I mean, follow us along on social media, and yeah, just really excited to be sharing this with the U.S. Keep an eye out. We will be in retail stores more and more. As we mentioned, we're fresh off the boat here, if you will, and yeah, super excited to share this amazing stuff with the United States and North America.